Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dragons, Gazelles, and Unicorns podcast. I'm Rosen Truman, and founder and CEO of the Center for Advancing Innovation and Ignite Social Impact. And I'm really thrilled and to welcome Esther Dyson on the podcast. She is incredible, and she has a history of funding some of the best startups on the planet. She has some intuition that she's going to provide us with some wisdom around today. She proactively promotes equitable well-being and proactively preventing health-destructing habits. She's an inspiration to all of us, and I'm very grateful and honored to have her on the podcast. And of course, I did not do the proper justice to the value proposition of Esther Dyson. So Esther, thank you so much for being on the podcast today.
Glad to be here. I have a lot to live up to after that.
Oh, goodness gracious, no. So Esther, I know that the people who listen to our podcast, they always love to learn about, how did you come to how did you come to where you are today? Your background and your journey. I would love to learn about, and everyone on the podcast would love to learn about your journey. And, from when you were a little girl to when you are now, you have done some remarkable things. And we probably could spend 3 hours on that, but over to you.
Okay, so fundamentals. I was born in Switzerland. My parents were both scientists, and I was a stubborn, curious little girl. One anecdote that figures later on is when my brother and I, he's a year and a half younger, and he's sort of the Mycroft to my Sherlock Holmes. He's the smarter brother. We both had chickenpox, and George would kind of walk around the house moaning, and I sat around counting my chickenpox pustules and sort of distancing myself by analyzing them rather than experiencing them. And later on, I still am a very interested quantified self person. I'm wearing a continuous glucose monitor that I don't need medically. I'm, of course, wearing a ring and a hoop band and so forth. My parents divorced when I was 5, and my stepmother took amazing care of us. The year I was 13, I went to live with family friends of my father's in England for a year. That was, my parents obviously paid for the flight and so forth, but it was kind of my initiative to make that happen. And it was great. I loved traveling. When the summer I turned 17, I hitchhiked around Europe and then spent 2 months in Morocco with my boyfriend. So went to Hong Kong and Tokyo and Taiwan and South Korea in, I think, 1976 when I was a reporter for Forbes. So anyway, I went through Harvard, where I rarely went to class, but worked for the Harvard Crimson. I proofread for money and wrote articles for the sheer love of it and being part of the Crimson. But that was my trade, really, is being a journalist, editing documents. I love editing people's press releases and decks. And if I can't find a typo, I'm disappointed. So that's sort of the skill part. The interests are varied. After 3 years at Forbes, I went to Wall Street for 5 years. One of the companies I worked with was Federal Express. And that's kind of my model of a startup. It creates a new market. It does something innovative, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a long story, but ultimately I joined a guy called Ben Rosen, who had a newsletter called the Rosen Electronics Letter, and then bought it from him in 1982, 83. And then for 25 years, basically this newsletter and the attached conference, which was called PC Forum, it was a business and it was profitable, but it's real. I owned it, and its real purpose was my education. And it was the perfect place to watch the PC emerge. Then there was the internet. The PC forum started out as the personal computer forum. It ended up as the platforms for the communication forum. In the middle of that, I started going to Russia in 1989. I'd learned Russian in high school because my dad was, he was a astrophysicist, and
Oh my goodness.
NASA was part of the family, whatever. So we knew that even though the Soviet government wasn't good, the Russian people were, and Russian scientists, of course, were the best in the world. So I started going to Russia in 1989, and that created a whole new vertical in my life, if you like. I'm not a serial entrepreneur. I'm much more a parallel vertical, whatever. Sold a newsletter and stuff in 2007, started getting interested in air taxis. And as a kid, I had pretty much thought, well, space travel, it's like airplane travel. It'll, by the time my father grew up, airplanes were routine. I figured by the time I grew up, space travel would be routine. And then in the early 2000s, I discovered that wasn't quite true. So I got more interested and ultimately ended up training at the Yuri Gagarin Cosmonaut Training Center, from which I have a certificate of completion from 2008 to 2009 as backup to Charles Simonyi. And that was wonderful. I did not, so I was the backup. There was some small chance I would go, like a lottery ticket, but I bought the education. And of course I was disappointed not to go, but it was not like I bought the lottery ticket and it didn't work out. It was like I bought the education, it did work out, but the lottery ticket attached didn't. And then got more and more interested in healthcare, but the sort of science journalist part of me kept asking, why are we spending so much money fixing people when they shouldn't have been broken in the first place? So I got much more interested in how we create resilience and health and make it so that the problem right now is not the cost of healthcare is high, but the real problem is that we need so much of it that people are falling apart. Children are being damaged before they grow up. And maybe I should stop and you can ask a few prompting questions.
I have 1,000 questions. I have 1,000 questions. What is Mycroft? What does that mean?
Oh, Sherlock Holmes' smarter brother was called Mycroft Holmes.
Okay.
But mine's called George. He's great. He's written a bunch of books, including Turing's Cathedral, about basically the entire evolution of. So we grew up in Princeton, where both the bomb and the computer were pretty much developed simultaneously and in complementary way. And he tells that story magically. And also Darwin Among the Machines, about Darwin and evolution. And he's a brilliant science historian. And he also worked as historian at Blue Origin, but he's very discreet and won't tell me anything.
Okay, all right. That's a secret. What's a hoop band?
It's a band that measures it focuses on HRV, heart rate variability. It measures your heart rate and various other aspects. And it's targeted sort of towards athletes, and it's very good for measuring exercise and its impact. The Oura Ring is more focused on sleep and their circadian rhythm. So they're complementary.
Okay. Just only because I think that people would probably want to either Google it, but it's good to.
Yeah, WHOOP, and the Oura Ring is OURA ring.com.
Awesome. So I'll just mention something that was kind of maybe interesting in parallel to what you did. I waitressed since I was 13 to make money, but then I taught ER diagramming. So like you did journalism, I thought, well, you know, I'm starting college. And my mom kind of dropped me off at college and said, okay, here you go. You don't get any money. You know?
Right.
But I had several jobs. And one of them was ER diagramming, and that kind of,
ER diagramming?
yeah, it's entity relationships.
Oh, relationships. Okay, got it. Yeah.
So it was like back in the, I mean, 29 years ago.
Yeah, two-phase commit and stuff like that. I remember that fondly.
But the thing is, you had to like draw it all out, and you had to
Yeah.
know how to, like the primary, you know, secondary relationships and all that stuff. You know, so what do you think made you a stubborn, curious little girl?
My parents, and they were also stubborn and curious and well-educated, and I was expected to be the same.
We have a lot of parallels.
Yeah.
So, you know, I started my career on Wall Street as well. It's very interesting. We both did that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, my first job was at Goldman. By the way, I had to beg my way in.
Mhm.
I was told 143 times no.
What year was this?
1994.
Was Steve Friedman still there?
Yeah, he was there. So
Steve Friedman interviewed me, and everyone else, I sort of felt I could know them or tell them stuff and they would just believe it. I mean, not that I was going to lie, but just, you know, they weren't really, somehow they would just believe it. Where Steve Friedman, it was clear if I told him something that wasn't true, he'd figure that out. And
that's
I
funny.
always were. So sorry, keep going about
No, so,
1990.
yeah, it was very interesting. So at the time, they didn't hire non-MBAs.
Mhm.
And so literally 143 times I got told no. And then I thought, you know, I grew up so poor that I really wanted to make money, and I really wanted to work for Goldman. It was just like this dream I had.
Yeah.
I was like, if you go to Goldman, then, you know, you made it. You know, I just thought, you know, it's you great, right? So, but I didn't have an MBA. I didn't want to get an MBA. I wanted to make money, you know, so because I just want to make money. So, I mean, that was my objective. I mean, you know, when you're 19 and you grew up poor and you're done
Yeah.
with college and you know, you graduate. My mom actually did pick me up, 90 humility, but because that was a rule she had. But anyway, they hired me because I made up this crazy scheme, and it was a white paper. So I thought the biggest problem that Goldman has is errors. And then, by the way, I don't know if that's true, but what I did was I researched what I thought was true. I mean, I did a bunch of research, and I thought that the error issue was the big problem. So then I thought, well, okay, how can you fix that? So I made up this scheme of straight through processing so that when the guys at 85 Broad, the sales traders, they wanted to do a trade, they would normally pick up the phone and say, I want to do a trade. And then it's a phone call.
Right.
The guys on the floor do the trade. They call back
Right.
and say, this is the trade. And then there's a clerk sitting there typing everything in. So, I mean, I just like researched it. And so I thought, well, what if they could somehow digitally communicate? I mean, this is like
basically the two-phase commit. That's amazing.
Yes. So yes. So I thought closed loop processing, right? So I mean, the little tiny part about this is that they would scan the ticket in on the floor. It would show up on a touchscreen PC. They could change it right there. Then they hit the sign that says okay, and then it goes up to 85 Broad, and then it's in the system, and they say okay, and yes, it's two-phase commit. Yeah, I mean, it's a ancient
No
technology.
wonder they hired you.
Yeah, they hired me without
Yeah.
an MBA, which I was very proud of at the time. I mean, you have to move on, but I was really excited to be hired. But this is not about me. That was just a little tiny thing. I'm wondering if you know Dylan Taylor.
I do.
Oh, okay. So have you done any investments with him?
To be honest, I'm not sure. We're probably in a couple of the same things. He's also he's the chair of the patrons group at the Commercial Spaceflight Federation. And yeah, I've known him for a long time because space investing is still a pretty small group of people, though it's becoming much fuller of private, I mean, SPACs now and private equity, and like everything else, it's a little bubbly.
What do you think about
yeah.
SPACs?
Pardon?
What do you think about SPACs?
Well, I think they're like almost everything else in the world. Some of them are good and some of them are terrible. But right now, there's been a bit too many of them, and the ratio of good to bad is probably decreasing.
That's good, yes. Are there any that you're particularly interested in?
Well, one I am because I'm on the board of the company doing it, which is called Swivel. It's a company that I've joined the board of quite early on and invested in and so forth. It was originally based in Egypt, now in Dubai, and it's kind of like Uber for corporate shuttles, which is, that kind of undersells it. But what's interesting, if you look at the Google buses or something like that, in emerging markets in particular, there are lots of employers who want to get their employees to work in good shape, feeling relaxed and safe. And especially if they have some vision and are hiring women, they want them to arrive at work unharassed. And so it's a big market that, there's an emerging middle class. They're not ready to take Ubers or stuff like that. They don't have their own cars, but they really are beyond public transportation. I mean, so many thousands of people in India get killed every year falling off buses in the backs of trucks and hanging onto trains. And, it's whatever. So I love the company. I'm on the board, and they are doing a SPAC. The organizing entity is called Queen's Gambit, and they invest in female-friendly companies, including, I mean, Swivel's mission is everybody, not just women, but it's especially useful for women. And it's also, again, useful for this emerging middle class that is going to be the backbone of the, how shall we say, the economic development of a lot of places there. And I'm not sure which places I can mention yet, but all over the Middle East and Latin America and so forth. So that's one. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So Esther, you have been, and as you just stated, you have an eye for finding the best companies. I think
I've found some pretty bad ones. I mean, if you do on the order of 200, I've gotten lucky in many, and I've been unlucky in some, and whatever. But as an angel investor, I don't need to worry about. I'm not responsible to anybody else if I lose money, so I can take interesting risks, and I do things I love. I mean, the ones that don't work out, they're the cost of my education, and the ones that do work out pay for my education.
that's one of the things I love the most about you. You have this incredible tenacity for and desire to drive and advance technology that you're interested in that could create an impact in the world. And the bottom line is that well, okay, I shouldn't say it for you, but what I've learned about you is you're incredibly talented at understanding about education, like getting education and driving more fuel into that could create. I mean, the thing is, it's really interesting. So we do a lot of work. We have about, I think, 32 agreements with the Health and Human Services. So it's like Health and Human Services at NIH and then CDC and blah, blah, blah. So it's like a group. And one thing that I always say is that it's not about just advancing the technologies and creating companies around them. It's about advancing science, education, so that you can really understand what's happening. And that is something that's unique about you. I think you're probably the most unique person ever in your space. And everybody who ever interacts with you should be grateful for that. But, I think about, what I've learned, what I know about you and what I've learned about you. And, I just wonder, what is your vision? We all think about what is your impact on the world, right? I think about that a lot. And you have already made significant impact, and you constantly do. And I think about your journalism, all of the items you've already mentioned. But I think that one of the things that could be the most valuable, incredibly valuable to people who listen to this podcast, who are like entrepreneurs, investors, we have a lot of scope here. What are the nuggets that really drive you and
to do useful stuff, not flashy, and in a sense, high ROI, stuff that is leverageable. So just like little heuristics, I love to introduce two people and do a favor to two of them. I like to invest in things where my money or my support makes a difference versus, I'm not out picking investments that will just go make money. I'm out picking things where I can help them become successful. So, stuff that I know about, where I can be useful, where I can introduce people. And so I spent a lot of time in Eastern Europe, but I'm really not that useful there. I don't speak the local language. And in Russia, I'm much more useful because I speak Russian and I sort of know the environment. I love Eastern Europe. It's fun. And I've done some investments there, including indirectly UiPath, which is ultimately a Romanian company. But it's where can you go that you have leverage, not necessarily financial, but some kind of, where your money or your advice is going to make more of a difference and actually make things work out better than they would have otherwise. And in a sense, Wellville, which is the thing I'm doing now, it's a 10-year nonprofit project to show really, one, how important it is to invest early in health as opposed to spend later renting health through healthcare. And started that in 2014. And I've learned a ton. It was much more focused on health and healthcare. And now it's really much more focused on equity and social conditions and, yes, health. But the things that drive health really are things that society needs to pay for collectively, starting with maternal, pre-postnatal care. You can damage a child really badly by the time they're 5. I mean, even earlier. But if you give them 5 years of strengthening and resilience, and not feeding them Coca-Cola in a bottle, and feeling loved and nurtured, and that makes such a huge difference. And it's also, if you're financially oriented, it's so cheap compared to trying to fix things later. And I just wish if our government could invest in childcare by subsidizing childcare and price in the externalities of the damage caused by sugar and crappy food by taxing it, we would have an amazingly different outcome for our society. And I mean, it's a little more complicated than that, but that really is the start. And creating conditions in which people naturally are able to fulfill their potential rather than getting damaged on the way into school and beyond. So that's what we're doing. And we're not trying to scale. We're trying to work in 5 small communities and help them do that. We're not doing it ourselves. People need to do it and own it in their own communities. We don't want anybody's job. We're not pouring in money. We're helping them build the social infrastructure for themselves. And then at the end of 10 years, at the end of 2024, our mission is to basically show what worked and what didn't, and have other people copy them.
So, Esther, I have like 1,000 things to say about what you just mentioned. How does someone try to replicate and leverage your platform?
Well, it's not a platform, but ultimately we want people to say, if those people in Muskegon could do that, or if the people in Spartan could do this, we could do it too. Because if you need us, it's not scalable. On the other hand, if you think you can do it for yourself, and there's also vectors of, so a lot of the work, the Wellville community I work with is Muskegon, Michigan, and their YMCA started out doing a small DPP, diabetes prevention program. And then with our encouragement, they decided to scale. And now they're actually doing online diabetes prevention program with many of the Ys across the state of Michigan. And ultimately our goal is to not to tell the Y it needs to do better, but quite the contrary, tell the Y, wow, this is so great. You should do this in all states. And if they can do it in Michigan, they can do it in Louisiana and everywhere. So it's showing what can be done in a tangible way, rather than through scientific papers that, everybody knows that, but it's too difficult to do it in the real world. We're doing it in the real world. So we're not building special communities. And again, we're not pouring money in. We're helping them scramble for resources and building. It's just like kids. You can't pay them to do their homework. They need to feel motivated. And we find the people who are motivated and help them become better at what they do. We help them to collaborate, because so many community organizations just spend all their time competing for grants.
So, if someone wants to replicate because you said you want people to replicate the community, how do they do it?
Well, replicate is not the word I used.
No, I know you didn't. I apologize.
Copy. No, it's just, it's not follow this curriculum. It's follow this approach, follow this attitude. Find the people in the community who are effective, help them become more effective, because effective people will share. They've got excess capacity. They'll partner with complementary people. The YMCA in Muskegon is partnering with Goodwill to offer childcare. So in a different community, it might be, in Spartanburg, there's something called Hello Family, which is a bunch of community organizations focused on early childhood. But in each case, it's getting the people who are good at something, to scale it, to share it, to partner with others rather than, again, compete with somebody doing something similar. And then to see that this actually works, that people, and we're not there yet. You know, people say, wow, I want to move to Muskegon because things are really happening there.
Awesome.
And in parts of Muskegon, that's happening. And there's economic development as part of it. And so is good schools. I mean, there's no one thing. And there's a wonderful book by Alison Gopnik at University of California called The Gardener and the Carpenter. It's about raising children. And the basic message is, as a parent, you are a gardener helping this plant to become the best sunflower or lily or whatever it is, but you can't construct it into what you want. You simply have to nurture it and garden it and make it flourish as what it wants to be. And in the same way, these communities, you can't construct this. You have to nurture it and feed it, and then it will become the very best version of what it wants to be. So there's no, you need 29% of diabetes prevention and 13% of, mental health support. And it's much more organic, because what you want to do is give people a sense of agency that gives them the ability to think long-term and plan and invest. And ultimately we have this quadrant chart, and at the lower left-hand corner, it's me now. Upper right-hand corner, it's all of us in the future, and getting people to move their focus and their thought patterns and to the long term. What will this short-term desire is addiction, and long-term desire is purpose, and long-term desire for all of us is what we're focused on.
Gosh, so much that I would love to ask you. I'm prioritizing.
Whatever, we can always do more later.
Yes, we can. What drives you, Esther?
So I used to say, and it's still true, if I were a maid, I'd like a dirty room. I like making things work. I like fixing things and constructing things and understanding how they work and then making them work better.
I love the tagline of your email.
Oh yeah, always make new mistakes. Don't make the same old ones. But
yes,
yeah, we've made mistakes in Wellville and elsewhere, and I always feel, it's genuine. It's not just, it's like, yeah, I screwed this up, but I'm learning from it. Or things aren't going very well. I'm trying to do this interesting thing with continuous glucose monitors where teenage kids at the Boys and Girls Club can wear them and learn how their own metabolism works, along with learning how the metabolism of the food system works. But suddenly it turns out, I thought we would get the continuous glucose monitors in September, but it's November and it's maybe. So now we're just going to give them Oura rings, and okay, we'll focus on sleep rather than on blood sugar. But ultimately it's the same idea. Look at your data, learn from your data, understand how your behavior affects your data, and how your data, how your sleep then affects how you feel the next day and stuff like that, by looking at your own data rather than reading a book that just seems a little too academic and confusing. And
right.
But going through this process of switching from the CGMs to the Oura rings as well. Yeah, okay. Next time we'll do it much better. And this time we've learned. And so anybody who wants to do a project like that, we're doing it with Boys and Girls Club, they can learn from our mistakes, and with luck, other Boys and Girls Clubs will do it. And so will other after school programs. But right now in Muskegon, this is something really special for a bunch of underprivileged kids that the rich kids won't be doing.
Oh, so,
And nice.
we need to talk because we just got this EDA grant to boost the underemployed in um, um, to create, basically boost the underemployed that are talent meets opportunity. We were discussing that yesterday, and we want to be we have a grant to make that happen, and we have also some other advocates that could come in. So I might end the call 5 minutes early, so I can have 5 minutes with you on that.
Well, I'll gladly talk with you about over the weekend. And I mean, seriously,
Perfect.
we are still learning, but if you would love to do anything like this, I just think it's a much better way to learn. And my hope is all these kids will end up healthier and with a sense of agency, and also understanding how they're being marketed to. I want to give them the tools to manipulate themselves rather than be manipulated by advertisers. But I also want, hey, you could go get a job in a hospital, or you could be a diabetes coach, or you could learn more about your body and become a doctor, who knows? But just some sense that, yeah, this is really cool stuff. And do you realize you're using statistics? Like the famous thing where, oh my gosh, I've been speaking prose my whole life.
So, oh gosh, I have so much more to talk to you about, but I want to tell you one thing. Just because you talked about gardeners. So when I was little, we had this huge garden, giant garden.
Yeah.
My mom gave us like 8 rows, and I was always proud of my rows because I had like laundry baskets full of tomatoes, and now I have 7 varieties of basil, and then I have 3 varieties of Brussels sprouts. But the Brussels sprouts, when it snows, is the only time they bloom for some reason.
Interesting.
Isn't that interesting? But it just goes back to your you mentioned as a parent, you're a gardener, and it's really true.
Gardening is, let's say, I don't do much, but I actually have a little plant growing on my desk right now.
Oh, really? What is it?
A bunch of, I don't even know what it is, but it's a bunch of little seeds that somebody sent me.
Well, you have to come to DC or Maryland, so I can give you some. I have some chocolate mint and orange mint, and have like all these. I don't know if you like basil, but
basil I do, and the Brussels sprouts actually, and the tomatoes.
All right, we'll come in November, and then you'll get everything.
Okay. Next time.
All right, since I only have like 5 more minutes of your time. So Esther, I mean, it's a sincere honor and pleasure to have you. I'm so grateful. What would you suggest to people who have, a great idea that could make an impact in the world? And how do they go about making it happen? What are your words of wisdom for?
So the first is that people like me don't invest in an idea. They invest in a team that can make the idea work. And for people like me, also understand that the default is no. There's a lot more wonderful ideas and even wonderful people than I have money. And so I'm not rejecting people. I'm simply not able to consider them all. And it's an important thing, because you're going to get rejected a lot. If you want to disrupt something, go work in that industry for a few years so that you know what you're up against. And so you have friends in the industry that will help you as you start your business in whatever industry it is. I mean, if it's completely from outside, I don't know, but it's like I do not think in general the idea of skipping college or leaving college and immediately doing a startup. find some partners who know stuff, and ideally surround yourself with people who know more than you do and who are better than you at doing most things, and you be the glue that actually turns them into a team. Those are the best companies. And do not be focused on being CEO. Be focused on the problem you're trying to solve. Even if you have the perfect solution, 9 times out of 10, you'll actually, that particular solution will change a lot over time. So again, be wedded to the problem rather than the product that is going to solve that problem. What is it that's going to deal with, you know, whatever it might be? With FedEx, it just took so long for packages to get somewhere, and they all needed to go somewhere individually. And so he simplified the whole thing by shipping everything to Memphis and then back out from Memphis. People don't want to go through Memphis overnight, but packages don't care. And so he really just simplified it. Now with dynamic scheduling and stuff, the Memphis idea doesn't make as much sense. We've got computers, and so you can calculate everybody's route and dynamically reschedule it all. But that's many, many, many years later. And part of the lesson there, because FedEx, I think, I was privileged to work with them early on. You know, they've changed a lot, and what they do has changed a lot over time, and be prepared for that as well. You need to keep improving rather than perfecting what you do. Improving is moving forward, whereas perfecting is hitting a fixed point, and then where do you go?